Action.
And action. All right, everyone, welcome to Analytics in Action, our how-to webinar series from Association Analytics. I'm Katrina McAfee, the Senior Marketing Manager here at A2. We're going to give it just a minute like we usually do, get everyone logged on. We did not think of a fun question for this time. If everyone wants to let us know where you're calling in from. I am in North Florida.
Northern Virginia, the Silicon Valley of Associationville.
Likewise, Northern Virginia. There we go. Betsy, welcome.
Welcome everyone to the webinar. See, people are piling in. We got tons of people ready for this. People are excited to extend the value of their AMS. I'm telling you. Philadelphia.
Northern Virginia, Chicago. I feel like Chicago's like the second, well, it's the second city, but also the second city for associations.
In DC.
Nation's capital. All right.
Nashville, that's where we're going for annual. How many people on here are going to ASA annual?
I'll be
in
there.
Nashville in August. We will all be there. Get to
I'll be
meet you guys in person.
I hear we're going to be playing some games. I don't know if I can say what they are out loud, but it might rhyme with schmornschmol.
Now we're going to have a whole tailgate themed booth block. You guys will see emails coming out about that soon, but there'll be lots of fun games, raffles for lots of prizes. Just got to come by and see us.
All right, let's do it.
All right, let's get started. So today's topic, expanding the value of your AMS with analytics. We have Bill and Greg here as your hosts. For anyone that hasn't been on these, you're in great hands with these two guys. Bill is our SVP of Strategy and Solutions. He's been in the product marketing and association space for a long time. We don't have to say years, 20 plus years, right? And Greg is the same for 15 plus years. So they know a lot about data, a lot about associations. And I'm going to hand it over, I think, to Greg to get us started.
Thanks a lot, Katrina. Well, welcome to our webinar today. I want to highlight a post we all read and collaborate over the evening, which was people take too long at the beginning of their webinars to get to the good stuff. So we're not going to spend 15 minutes introducing the concept and tell you what you're going to learn. We are going to smash directly into the exciting content today. But before we do have to have a brief respite on who we are here at Association Analytics. And we cover this because we constantly get questions after the webinar. What do you guys do again? So we are Association Analytics. We are a software company with the strategic goal of helping associations love their data. Everything from data cleanup to data governance to data quality. And today, we want you to love the data in your AMS because you've got a lot of really good data, right? But you have challenges with this data. Is it clean? Can I use it? How do I best leverage this data? We want to talk to you today about how to love the data in your AMS. And that's exactly what we're going to get into. And we want to start by learning a little bit more from you about your AMS. So what do we want to know today, Bill?
All right. So a lot of times, we're in conversations with a lot of different associations, and I would say a good percentage, right? Maybe even the majority are either in the process of changing or are thinking about changing or have recently changed their AMS. So with that, I just want to get started with the little poll question as usual. And today's question is, when's the last time you changed your AMS? So our association changed AMS products in the last blank, right? In the last year, last 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe you've had yours for more than 10, or maybe you don't know.
I talked to them more than 10 not too long ago. They had it for a while.
All right, let's take a look. Okay.
Look at that.
So for the benefit of those that would watch this later, we have 14%, pretty high number overall, that changed in the last year. Just a smaller percentage, 5 and 9, in years 2 and 3. The most popular answer was within the last 5 years. That's 23%. Another 18 in the last 10 years. 14 have had their AMS for over 10 years. And then a few of us, around 20% of us don't know. So how many, just out of curiosity, how many are in the market right now? If you're in the market, if you're looking for a new AMS, tell us in the chat. And this is kind of, the reason for this is that's going to be relevant to a lot of the conversation today. So here's another question for you. If you've changed recently, or the last time you did change, what was the primary reason, right? Was it some functionality or some business process that your AMS just couldn't do? Was it reporting, integrations? It was just too difficult, right? Too much manual work. Maybe you just wanted something new, right? You'd been with your AMS for a long time. You wanted newer technology, or maybe it was just too expensive, right? So these are not all of the possible reasons, but these are the ones that we hear about most often. Let's go ahead and consider this.
Well, as we're waiting for that answer, I was struck by people who have their AMS for 10 or so years. Think about all that rich, juicy data you have in there.
All right. Yeah, thanks for answering, everybody. So again, for those that are watching later, 33% say it was core functionality or business process, right? So it just wasn't doing the things that you needed it to do. Just 8% said reporting, 25% said integrations, right? So that was our next most popular answer. And then all the rest are kind of evenly divided, right? New technology, too much work, cost, and others. So basically, the vast majority of us thought it was either missing a core piece of functionality, or is really those integrations that were a major pain point for us. So what do you think about that, Greg? Does that surprise you at all?
That doesn't surprise me a whole lot here. I feel like core business processes are a great reason to change. Integrations are another one. I hear that time and time again. It's really difficult to integrate with our AMS. Not a big surprise for me, to be honest.
Okay, so I want everyone to keep something in mind as we go through the rest of this, and that is that we're not really in the business of pushing you to change or not to change. However, for those that are in mind on the fence about whether they should change or not, I think there's some real things that you can think about, whether you can extend the value and extend the functionality of the AMS that you already have. For those of you that are maybe downsizing, right, maybe going to something that's a little less functional, I think there's some opportunities to extend that functionality and get more value by adding on, a relatively inexpensive piece of software that's going to allow you a separate analytics platform. So the idea is that we're going to augment what the AMS already does, and we're going to encourage you to really focus on doing the things that the AMS is best at, right? And leaving some of those other things potentially to an analytic system. So with that, we're going to go to one of the major reasons that we have an AMS, that we have data in the first place, and that's to answer questions.
As we get into this, I often think about way back in the day when people had their database in the closet at their office, and they would be like on site somewhere, and they'd be like, oh, we've got to like dial into our office to get access to our data. And think about it, it's all in the cloud now. And I'm wondering, in the near term future, can we be in like the virtual reality AMS where you're like looking around, like pulling member files out of virtual file cabinets? Is that where we're headed here? I don't know. Hopefully not. So let's talk about the questions you have, right? Because reporting wasn't a primary reason to switch AMSs, but I can't tell you how many conversations I've had in the last 3 years about reporting in AMSs, right? We have the reports it came out of the box with. Reporting's a bottleneck for us. It's a problem. But I think even beyond reporting questions, we don't have basic questions. We got tough questions, right? Which of my members are most likely to renew? Which product should we sunset, right? How do I position this product in front of the best possible member to buy it? What are we doing with diversity and inclusion, right? How do I take all those rich, juicy conversations coming from my online community, and how do I make sense of them in my AMS? And I think one of the takeaways today is, if we're going to expand the value of our AMS, we have to realize it's good at answering some questions, and it's not designed to answer other questions. And part of the reason these questions are hard is integrations, right? We don't always put all of the data back into our AMS, and we might not do it in real time. Having a background in event technology, I know a lot of associations will run their event registration outside of their AMS, and they won't even put it in there until the event's over. So like, it's really hard to run event reports in your AMS if the data's not there. But then we think about all this other data, right? It's not the fact, did Bill get an email? It's what link did he click on? How long after he got the email did he click it? What conversations is he having in the online community? What sentiment did he have after he took that course in the LMS last year, right? Those are the real answers you're looking for. And not all of that data fits in nice, neat little boxes back in the AMS. So if we're going to expand the value of our AMS, we have to understand it's really good at some things and it's probably not so great at other things. And handling a lot of this data, we're going to call unstructured data, is probably beyond what our AMS is really good at. We want to put the structured data in there, the transactional data in there, but we still need a place to put this rest of the data. And we're going to refer to that today as a data warehouse. Now, even if you have a data warehouse, the AMS is still key because it's going to have a lot of that core centralized data for you, right? Who are our members, the demographics, their primary purchases, how long have they been a member, did they renew or not? All of that insightful data is going to be in the AMS. Now, I talked a little bit about questions, and you're going to get some questions answered from your key systems through reports, and other questions you're going to get answered through analytics. But Bill, what is the big difference here between reporting and analytics? Help me understand that.
All right, awesome. So before I do that, speaking of questions, we had a question come in from Edward, and he says, what about the use of AI to help improve the functionality of the AMS? And so, yeah, so to that, I would say two things. Number one, the use of AI is, generally speaking, is going to require some kind of outside repository and some kind of system like a data warehouse type system, which we'll describe throughout the conversation today. And the other thing I would say is that it really augments all of your source systems, right? Everything that every source system in your ecosystem can be augmented through AI. It's things like natural language processing, right? Which we want to do to understand the sentiment of all of those community posts and all of that feedback that we get from our events, things like that. And all of those things can be a big part of your overall strategy, right? So it's things that you ask, right? It's things that you observe, and then there's things that you derive, and then you get into AI, which is even one step further, which is kind of deriving things in an automated fashion, right? Without even having to do that kind of analysis. So definitely that's aspirational, I think, still for many of us here, but it's definitely something that can improve the functionality of all of your systems.
I want to soapbox for 1 second because I get this question a lot, and I think AI is pretty exciting, and I'd love for those tools to be highly effective for associations. But I feel like there's some fundamental things we've got to get right before we can start using AI. If we don't have good, clean data in our source systems with good definitions and data governance, AI is not going to be very good. If we're not tagging things with a reasonable taxonomy, AI is not going to be very exciting, right? If we don't have business rules that allow us to leverage our data successfully, AI is going to be out of our reach. If we're not using derived data, we're still steps before AI gets there. So I think as we look at the continuum, right, of where we want to go with analytics, AI is certainly on the roadmap for a lot of us, but I feel like there's some fundamental things we've got to get right before we jam a bunch of data into a box and expect a magical answer to come out, right? We've got to have some reasonable structure to that data. And the other thing is we've got to have a lot of really good data for that AI to be useful, or else it's just going to give us answers that we can't trust.
All right, thanks, Greg. Awesome. So really quick, I'm not going to belabor this too much. I think a lot of you have seen this before, but the main differences between reporting and analytics is reporting is kind of rear facing, right? This is your business intelligence. This is looking at, what has happened, the what and the how, whereas analytics is more about the data exploration, and that's going to tell you the why, right? Your report's going to tell you that your registrations were down or that your membership is down year over year. Your analytics is going to allow you to drill in and drill down and kind of explore some of the why behind that. So to summarize, it's about understanding on the reporting side, understanding what's happened, and the analytics part is more about the exploration and taking action. So along those lines, since we're talking about AMS and how to extend the value, what our broader point is, take the transactional, right? The AMS, which produces very good reports, or at least can produce very good reports, and extend that or expand that with an analytics platform, right? So the AMS is optimized for transactions, right? All of those dues payments, all of those, you need to have those point-to-point integrations with your other systems. So you know, when I go to register for that event, do I get the member discounted rate or not, right? So you need to be connected to your AMS and has to be able to process all of those transactions. So the AMS is going to store things in rows, whereas your analytics platform is going to store things in columns. And the basic difference there, row-based storage is really easy to get information in really fast, right? Column-based storage makes it easy to get things out fast. So it's when you're reading the data from the system, it's going to be a lot better. Your AMS is current data, right? So you can tell everything about me currently, right? But what happens when my member type changes, right? My member type changes forever, right? And if my member type was different 5 years ago, that's information that's going to be lost when you go back and look at those reports. So the AMS is about day-to-day operations. If you get a call to your customer service center, you need that AMS to tell you everything about me and everything about Greg, so that you can service us properly. But it's not really going to help you decide which products or services are good ones to invest in, and to find other populations like me or like Greg if we're ideal customers for some reason. So really, it's day-to-day operations versus business decision making. So okay, so I think that wasn't exactly intro material. I think we're already getting into some learning pieces. So if anyone thinks that we ran afoul of our advice early on about getting to the good stuff, we'll have to disagree on that. So, but that being said, here's where we're getting into the 5 ways. So take it away, Greg.
Not to be too clickbaity, we wanted to summarize everything in 5 primary ways to extend the value of your AMS with analytics today. And we're going to start chopping away on these right now. So what's way number 5? Integration. So let's do a little word game here. In the context of your AMS, when you hear the word integration, what phrases come to mind? What feelings come to mind? Think about it. And if you're feeling social, drop it in the chat and tell us what you think about when you think about integrations.
Yeah, fear and money, top 2.
Right? I think about time. I think about complexity.
There you go. You and
think
William
about
both.
supporting it over the long term. Like I might build a really good integration today, but is that going to work in 6 or 7 years from now? I don't know. Error reports, right? Chasing those things down. That's exactly what you're thinking about.
All right. So yes, on this one, I think I wasn't very confident that we were going to get many of these onto our list, right? Not many people were thinking, best of breed, build versus buy, things like that. You're thinking about fear. You're thinking about expense. You're thinking about hassle, right? I mean, it's a lot of time and effort and resources to maintain this sorts of things. So anyway, these are the things that that we're going to be talking about. Best of breed. You want to have systems that are fit for purpose, and good integrations are going to allow you to do that. I think generally speaking, integrations are things that you want to buy and not build, right? If anyone disagrees with that one, I'd be interested to hear about it. And you don't want to sacrifice performance, right? So that means that if you have a bunch of systems that are hitting your AMS constantly, right, with API transactions and things, that's going to wreck your performance, and you generally speaking are not going to want that. Okay, so best of breed overall approach. We kind of talked about this, but the idea here is don't use your AMS for everything, right? So that's kind of an outdated way of thinking. Jam all the data into your AMS and see what you can get out. And the main reason for that is because they were so expensive, right? They had to do everything in order to justify the cost, and they are not as expensive now. But even if that money's already spent, you'll be much better served to focus on what the AMS is really good at, right? The dues things, maybe if you have certain programs, certifications, things like that. But other things, other types of analysis, other types of advanced reporting, it's just really not going to be good for that. So, but the individual source systems are specialized for those types of transactions, and you can aggregate all of that into this repository, which we'll talk about. You do need point-to-point integrations, right? We talked about that before. You need to know that that I'm a member when I register for that event. You need to know that I get the special pricing and things like that. And then there's iPaaS technologies which are out there. So if you are struggling with integrations, you don't have a developer in-house, you don't want to go out and pay to have them individually built, there are technologies where you can get a separate platform to manage some of those point-to-point integrations. Do you have a comment, Greg?
We've got a great question in the chat here, and I think this really helps further our conversation. So it's what's a good example of buying an integration versus building an integration? And I'll get it started. A lot of products and a lot of companies in the association marketplace know each other and have a lot of customers in common and have productized their integration, right? So if I'm going to buy an email marketing platform, there's a really good chance that my AMS has already worked with that email marketing platform, and there's a pre-built productized integration that takes into consideration best in breed practices, common things that everybody wants, and it's built in a very robust way, which means it's not going to break all the time. It also is built by the vendor themselves. So when they upgrade or when changes are made inside their product, they're upgrading that integration as they're doing that, right? When we add new features, we automatically add them to our integration so they're able to be taken advantage of. Building an integration, you might have a couple ways to do a bespoke integration, custom one of. You could hire a vendor to do it and say, hey, you have a great team. Can you build me this integration? Or associations do have tech teams. They can build integrations. And I don't think it's never the right answer. But I think you have to look at why are you building this integration? Is there something different you're integrating with? No one's ever used that software platform before. We custom built it and we need to integrate it in our AMS. Or the reason we're integrating the data is so unique and different that we have to build it ourselves. No one else could ever be able to do that. So when you're looking at build versus buy, we could do a whole webinar about that. You really want to look at, do I want to take advantage of best in breed? Do I want to reduce my risk, possibly reduce my cost and make it more sustainable for the long term? Or is there a unique reason that I need to do this, that no other association would ever want to do this, and we have to go out and blaze a trail on our own?
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. So that was actually a good segue to my next slide, which is about integrations. And you can see that I've specified hassle-free integration that I say for analytics, right? And so the reason I did that is everything that Greg said is still valid, even if you go out and buy a product like Acumen, which comes with integrations, right? Because the scope of the integration and the type of data that's necessary to pass between systems can be different if it's for transactional purposes versus for analytics, right? And so you might buy that connector, with your email marketing platform and your AMS, but you still might want to have a pre-built connector for analytics through a product like Acumen, because you never really want to bring in all of that data related to your email, right? The actual contents of the messages or of your community posts, for example. The volume is too high, or some things just change too often. You just really don't even want that many records, pushed into your AMS, and you don't want that sort of real-time interaction as we talked about before. So, so with a product like Acumen or with the analytics platform that we're sort of advocating that you look at here, all the integrations are going to come with it, right? So the integrations are out of the box. They're with the most popular tools that are used for associations, and the whole point is to get the data from those transactional systems, right? And from the transactional systems like your AMS, and you want to extract and transform that into an analytical format so that you can then develop visual reports based on that, right? So that's the idea. Speaking of which,
visual reporting. So let's play another word association game. When you think about visual reporting, what are the terms that come to mind? What's top of mind when you think visual reporting? Think about it. If you want to be social, drop it in the chat for us. Love to hear from more of you. Visual reporting, what do you think of? Interactive charts, right? Love it. Graphs, charts. What else are we thinking of? Anybody have any feelings or emotions when they get a visual report? Ooh, here we go. We're telling a story now, right? That's a much different question than what a report does.
Relief.
Right? Yeah. Right. So those are the feelings we get. And I think we're getting a lot closer to where analytics comes into play. So all systems have reports, and we might rely on them for point in time access to numbers themselves. But when we really think about those tough questions we started with, this is how we can extend the value of our AMS with analytics by moving into visual reporting. And I'm not talking about my report has a pie chart above it, right? That's not visual reporting. I'm thinking about this interactive. It's intuitive. It's easy to use. I don't really have to understand what the data is telling me. I can just look at it and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense, right? I think self-service. I think I can access this myself. I don't have to go to another person to get this. It's going to be huge time savings. It's going to increase our collaboration, right? So these are all the things we think about when we think about visual reporting. Now, why is the visual part of reporting so key? This isn't me. This is science here. David wrote this paper and said that the brain's capable of absorbing 36,000 images every minute. But if you think about, what do you really remember? Why do we have slides? Why aren't we just talking heads today? It's because 80 to 90% of the information comes through your eyes, right? You only remember 10% of what you hear, only 20% of what you read, but 80% of what you see and do is retained.
Yeah, and just along those lines, as someone said, interactive reports, right? So that's an important difference between reports that you can actually do things with, that you can interact with and explore a little bit, versus something that's just a static, sort of table or a piece of paper. So I think that's important. So it's see and do. So it's not just that seeing is much better than hearing and reading, which it is, but if you can interact with it, then that makes it that much better. Okay, so some of you have seen this one before, but how many fives? What do you think, Greg?
Count the fives. The first thing I think of when I see this is I might need glasses, because they all start to blur together and I have to get really close to my screen to read them. And then I sort of start counting them, but I mean, this is tough. I don't know.
All right, if anybody wants to answer, we'll take answers. It'll become obvious at a certain point, but someone can get the right answer before then.
There's got to be a better way to lay this data out visually that helps me see it.
Right, what about if we add some visual cues?
All right, I can start to see there's groupings. I'm a big fan of the box versus the color, and I assume our accessibility friends out there love the box as well, but I think that's I can start to see it a lot easier.
It still is not great though, right? I mean, this is like the massive Excel sheet, and you manage to add a little bit of conditional formatting to it to shade some boxes, and it's like,
I'm still
okay.
hunting around though.
Yeah. Why don't you just tell us how many? Right? Okay.
We're going to get there. We're going to tell you how that. We're going to talk about derived data in a little bit, and that's exactly what you're looking for.
21, close, right? So now we've added a recognizable pattern here, right? So you can see we have alignment here. This one's called repetition, where we just repeated the same pattern over and over again. What if we do both, right? What if we use alignment and repetition and we have a visual cue on top of that? Then it's going to be pretty clear, right? So the correct answer is 24 fives, but Elizabeth, you get give you an honorable mention for jumping in with the answer, and you're pretty close. All right, but the idea is that we're starting to get to a place where where we're highlighting the difference, right, between visual reporting and just looking at numbers. Okay.
So what's the other problem we run into with reporting versus analytics and visual reporting is the idea of this bottleneck. So think about, and maybe if you have this documented, what's your process for asking questions now? Right? If you wanted to get data out of a system, how would you do that? What would the process be inside your organization? And we wrote this process down based on asking lots of people, right? It sort of has this request, and then we sort of play telephone and we clarify this request and we refine it, and then we get this data back. But we get this raw, unstructured, unformatted data. We've got to go clean it up. We've got to go dedupe it. We're spending all this time in Excel, sort of moving things around. And then we finally get to the exciting part where we can analyze the data, right? And then at the end of that, we can make a recommendation or take an action based on that data. But if you think about where are you spending time in this process, you're probably spending the majority of your time on getting the data, cleaning and deduping and organizing the data before you can ever really spend time on that analyzing and acting. Yeah. And this is a big challenge here, because we don't want you to spend 80% of your decision making on the raw data. We want you to get right to the insights.
Right, and not many people on today's call cited reporting as a big problem. However, I mean it is a problem in the sense that these errors. This is the reason those exist, is because there's usually only a handful of people that know how to get data out of the AMS, right? So the bottleneck refers to the IT person or the analyst that knows how to query data. And when you ask for it, you didn't ask for it exactly the right way. So you have to go back and ask again, or they have to clarify their request that you made. And all of that, all of us being busy and having other things to do can really delay you can really extend the time, between when we have a question and when we get the data that's required to answer it and to take any action.
So if we think about that old process versus, like what a great place to be. This is where we want to be, right? I want to self-serve. I want to access the data when I want to the systems I want, whether it's membership or event data. I'm not on the product team, but I want to know what products people are buying, right? The dozens and dozens of visualizations and dashboards that you can just get out of the box can replace all those reports. You can have one of these dashboards that replaces hundreds of static point in time reports. Have you ever gone into your list of reports and you have like 900 reports that were made 10 years ago that no one looks at anymore, right? Because you had to make a new report every time you had a different question. The idea behind dashboarding is that it's right there at your fingertips. It's all pre-laid out. You don't have to know what question you want. You can just start clicking on it and getting to the answer you're looking for. I think it also makes collaboration huge, right? If we are in an earlier webinar, we talked about OPD, other people's data, right? That request might have to go to another department and she's on vacation in Hawaii for 2 weeks and I'm not going to get that answer until she gets back. The idea about this is it's easy to get the data out of other systems. There's no uploading or downloading. There's no emailing back and forth. All of this data is at your fingertips when and how you want to use it.
Right. You mean we don't have to export it and then email it to each other, right? With our comments in the body of the email. And I know a lot of us are still doing that.
Can you add some more columns to that report? I see you have purchase date, but what I really want to know is delivery date. That's the column I was looking at. Can you send me that back?
Right. Okay. Right. And so we're trying to simplify that, right? If you want purchase date or you want delivery date instead of purchase date, that's a filter, right? That's a toggle. You take this, you interact with it, and you change it the way you want it so that everybody's using essentially the same dashboards and they can customize it to what they want, right? Okay, so what do we do with that data, right? So once we share it with people, right? Greg wants the same data that I want, but he wants it a little bit differently. So what's he going to do with it once he has it? And that brings us to like the number 3 way that we can extend or expand the value in our AMS, and that is through data exploration. Okay, so same thing, word association. What comes to mind if I say data exploration? What are we thinking?
I think of chopping my way through a jungle to explore the unknown.
Pattern seeking. Yeah, I think that's true. Patterns, right? Patterns, trends. There we go. Beat you to it, John. Correlations, things like that. All right, cool. So let's jump ahead. I think you guys I think you guys are on the right track, right? So the kinds of things that are going to be easy to do in your analytics system, which are totally complementary and extend the value of your AMS. If you have an AMS and there's some movement to replace it and you don't want to, these are things that can save it, right? I mean, you can save the AMS that you've worked so hard to customize over time, maybe, right? At the same time, if you want that new AMS, but it doesn't do quite everything that you need, very likely that adding an analytics platform on top of it is going to get you over the hump and be able to close the deal on that new AMS that you want. So, okay. So with regard to data, yeah, go ahead.
I want to say something about Mike's comment phishing here. And I think that comment has a lot of value for me, right? If you think about what phishing is all about is you sort of have an idea what's underneath the boat, but you don't really know until you see it, until you get a hold of it, right? And I think there's this really fun concept of data exploration, which is like, I don't know what questions I have. I just want to go in there and click around and look for something that jumps out at me and says, yeah, that's exciting. Greg, look at this more. And this is a huge challenge with reporting. If you don't know what you're looking for, you can't find it in a report, versus data exploration has this idea of there might be something out there I didn't know I was supposed to look for. And I'm going to sort of drop my lure in the water. I suspect it's over here by the shore in the shallows. And that's where I'm going to start looking, and I'm going to find some golden nuggets that I didn't know were there. I think that's a really interesting part of where data exploration can come into play.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Greg. So here's the types of exploration. There are many other types, but we're going to look at a few of them here. We're going to look at trends, right? Which is if there's really just one big thing that your AMS really struggles with that you'll be able to do instantly with analytics, even going back in time, it's going to be trending that data, right? We're not going to be doing snapshots and all that kind of stuff anymore. We'll be able to do advanced filtering, based on demographics and this really flexible data model, which we'll touch on very slightly here in a second. We're going to drill down into our hierarchies. We're going to drill through so we have built-in analyses that, we're not all data scientists, so you don't need to think of, it's kind of like guided exploration, right? So Greg probably has a good metaphor for this, right? But some kind of, Sherpa or something, right? That teaches you how to explore your data. And then we'll look briefly at overlap as well. Okay, so all of this is made possible by the dimensional data model. And so not to get too deep into what this is, but this is optimized for analysis. And the way it does that is by having things called facts and dimensions, right? And your facts are like your business events, like a registration or a renewal or a member join or things like that. And around that, so those are things that you want to analyze. And the way that you want to analyze it, or the way that you want to slice and dice that data, is by your dimensions, right? So I want to look at my sales, for example, and I want to look at my sales by product. I want to look at it by individuals, by organizations. I want to look at my sales by date. I want to look at the regions that performed best in terms of sales. And maybe I want to combine these and stack them on top of each other and look at kind of an analysis that combines multiple dimensions. So the other thing I'll touch on really quickly is hierarchies. So when we talk about dates or products or things, they can be hierarchies, and those are going to be built into your analytics system, right? So we don't necessarily. Right? So imagine you get this spreadsheet, and it's all organized by state. You say, well, I wanted it by city, but now you have to do a whole new spreadsheet, right? Or it's organized by month, but you wanted it by quarter, something like that. So you have to recompile the data, create a new spreadsheet. Whereas in your analytics system, everything is at that lowest level of granularity, and you can summarize it at different levels that suit you. All right, so now Greg thought that was too technical, not very technical at all, really. But we want to look at what does that really mean to us as humans, right? We want to do queries and we want to find out interesting things. So handsome guy there in the center, tell us about it.
Yes, got him. So think about the difference between a report that says Greg registered. The dimensional model says Greg registered, but Greg's been a member since 2017. He lives in Northern Virginia. He's attended the event for the past 5 years. He tends to open your emails, but he opens event emails way higher. He uses the online community. He's certified, but he needs more courses. He typically attends these type of things. He spoke in the past. Like, which one of those gives you a richer picture of Greg, the registrant of the meeting? So when you think about that dimensional model, what I really want you to think about is like all the data's there. It's just not there. It's over there and it's over there and it's underneath of that table, right? In the traditional database, we have to sort of do all these joins and connect everything together. Whereas in the dimensional model, all the things I'm looking for are a click, a drill through, away. And that's a huge advantage here, right? You have all this data, but it's not connected together because of the need for speed. When we connect it together, we can easily access the data when we want.
Cool. And another, just it's probably obvious to a lot of you, but just to add to that, it's not just finding out all these things out about Greg, which is great, but we can also find a bunch of people like Greg, right, doing a similar type search, right? So, you could find all this stuff out about Greg specifically, like using the AMS, but if you wanted to find a big population of people like Greg to market something to, that would be quite difficult. Okay, so trends over time, right? So what happens in your AMS if you want to do trend over time? You have snapshots, right? So you go back and you have these monthly snapshots that you extracted from your database, and you try your best to piece those together. And maybe your snapshots are quarterly, right? But your boss asked you for, a look month by month, and well, that's impossible, right? Because we've only snapshotted the data, by the quarter, so that's because in your AMS, it's really about current data, and so things are getting overwritten, right? So you're not able to track changes over time very specifically. So the analytics overcomes that, by basically rebuilding that history based on all of those transaction records that you have in your system. All right. Okay, so what about what about advanced filtering or demographics, right? So we have all that stuff that we know about Greg, like, that he opens the emails and that he attends events and what he likes to purchase and all of that. And so how can we, if we want to find a lot of people like Greg, we can use our advanced filtering and we can use our demographics, right? So by demographics, we don't want to just think about, where you live and how old are you. We want to think about what do you do. And so it's kind of hard to see here, but on the left here, there are a bunch of filters, which, are kind of like demographics, but they look a little bit different because they're really behaviors, right? So have you donated? Have you taken a course? Are you a member of the community, a board member, volunteer, so on and so forth? And you can build a very rich profile of the specific type of individual or organizations that you're looking for based on things that are kind of explicit, right? It's a transaction that happened, or it's a question that we asked you, right? You did or didn't do this. But then there are other types which are not so straightforward.
Things like observed data. So think about when you first started to use Amazon. Did they ask you all the favorite things you like to buy? When you go to Netflix and log in for the first time, do they ask you what type of shows and movies you like to watch? Of course not, right? They observe your preferences and interests over time. They pay attention to what you were doing. Furthermore, if you asked me what type of shows I like to watch, there's a really good chance that the things I tell you don't align with my behaviors at all, right? And this is very common out there. We see people self-identify in one bucket and behave in a completely different way. And then we use these self-identifying attributes to send marketing emails to them, and they don't click on them, and we're confused why, because that's not what they really want, and that's not what they really do. So here we've created a taxonomy, and we've said when people have these type of behaviors, they mean these type of things to us as an organization, right? When they purchase this or read this or go to that session, we know they're interested in these types of things. And I think observed data is a really good way to start using our AMS. Is all of these behaviors can be observed and taxonomized and put in buckets, and we can start leveraging that data visually to understand what people really want.
All right, awesome. Okay, so this one is pretty straightforward, right? This is the drill down, and it's straightforward in terms of how it looks on the screen and the functionality inside an analytics platform. But drilling down in a transactional system is pretty difficult, right? Again, it gets back to recompiling that data and all of that. So here's an example of retention. In the top left, we have retention that is shown year over year. There's a tiny little button here. It looks kind of like an org chart where we drill down. And essentially, there's a date hierarchy, right? And the date hierarchy goes from year, and it can go from there to quarter, and then it goes to month. And so now we have the same information, but it's shown month by month, right? So you can see the fine fluctuations in your retention rate as it changes over time. Now, we can add other stuff to it to get even richer insights, but this one is just about the ability to drill down. Now, closely related and sometimes confused item is the drill through, right? And so a drill down is getting down to lower levels of granularity within a hierarchy, and a drill through is going to something basically completely different. And why that's important is because, again, we are not all data scientists. We want to explore the data, but we're not sure how, right? So the data scientists would be very happy to just get a massive data lake, full of raw data, right? Because they want to, use cool technologies to process it. They want to apply, calculations that they know how to do. But for the rest of us, we want something that's going to kind of guide us for how we want to explore this data. And so what we're looking at here is a sales breakdown, right? And you can see we had this massive spike in sales, and it was, and we want to know why that is. And so what we do is we drill through, and the drill through has already some kind of pre-built analyses that we can go through, right? So there's geography breakdown, there's products, there's individual demographics, and so forth. So this one says geography. This is actually the product breakdown, so we missed a little bit there, right? So we're going to go from the products breakdown, and we're going to drill through to our products. And now once we've done that, we can see that we sold a couple of different types of products, right? Courses, and we sold, we sold some meetings, and we sold a few subscriptions. And then if we drill through on that, we want to look not at our organizational demographics, but our individual. And now we can go to down here where we're looking at things like, what do we know about those individuals that bought those specific products, right? So we went from all of our products down to a segment of our products, down to the individuals that bought them. We could just as easily have explored the organizations, then the individuals, and then from the individuals, the demographics, we're going to choose the demographics that we want to focus on, and then we're going to go to a list, right? So drilling down, or drilling through rather, is this process of starting with all of our data, selecting the parts that are most relevant to us, and then ending up with those that are really likely to respond to a call to action in most cases.
I think overlap could be one of my favorites, right? The idea that we want to identify people who've done thing A, have they also gone on to do thing B? And what does that overlap look like? And I know what you're saying. We've got some smart guy and gal. She knows how to use a pivot table. She can do that for me if I ask. Yeah, but then we get back into that feedback mechanism, right? Yeah, I want to know people who took this course. Did they also go to the meeting? I want to know only the executives, and I want to know only the professional members who've attended twice in a row. The idea is if we have data exploration enabled and we can just do this product overlap in real time, we can continually ask questions and refine until we get the list we're looking for. I asked somebody about this and they said they did a big project where they put all these variables together and they got the answer was 3 members. I was like, well, that's not a really good segment. They were like, no, that was useless. With visual exploration, we can refine and we can filter until we find a really good segment that we feel is good. And here we can say, you know, people who've bought this learning course from us, did they also attend our annual meeting? And we can start to put together our personas and our lists to target people based on the likelihood that they're going to do that next thing for us.
All right, home stretch now.
Item number 2, we've got two good items left here for you. So now we're talking about, somebody brought it up earlier, just tell me the answer, right? I don't want to do all the work myself, just tell me the answer. And really that's where we get to these advanced analytics, which is derived data. So when we think about deriving data, right, we're creating something net new that didn't exist before, and we're probably using a model or an algorithm to do that. And some really good examples. Does anybody have a good example of derived data they want to throw out before we give the answer? Derived data, what might be something we would derive? You guys are deriving things now, I almost guarantee you are.
Right, or calculate, right? Maybe you could.
Yeah. What are we calculating? So I would probably say retention rate, something we're all calculating, hopefully, right? What are other types of derived data we might talk about in analytics? So if we have all this rich, juicy data in our AMS, specifically 10 plus years of it, we can probably derive a lot of really interesting things out of that data. Bill, if you want to click for me, we can probably derive things like engagement score, right? That would be something really cool. We can probably derive correlations or build lookalike audiences. We can do predictive analytic models where we look around the corner and derive what's likely to happen based on past behaviors. We can take text analytics and derive sentiment from it. And ultimately, we might even want to derive recommendations, right? Think about that Netflix model. What is the next show Greg should watch on Netflix? That's derived data. They're not just walking me down a predefined path. They're using a model and our friend AI sometimes to help derive those things. So a couple you might want to use. Engagement scoring is going to be a huge one, right? This is a whole webinar series we've done that you should go watch about the exchange of value between you and the members, not just what do they consume, but how do they give back and how do those things relate to each other?
Okay, here's a good one that I like, and it's pretty straightforward. It's about correlation, right? So it doesn't mean that that one causes the other, but they're highly correlated. And a very good use case for that is looking at retention rate or even engagement scoring, actually. So if we know that that maybe we have a good retention rate, right? But maybe then we break it down into member types, and maybe one member type is a little bit lower than we'd like it to be, right? There's that leaky bucket. But what we would always want to do is understand how we can influence that, right? And the way we do that is by looking at what other behaviors and what demographics and things correlate with high retention, right? And so we can use our predictive model, right, to predict it and to mathematically determine, which things are statistically significant. But we can also just go into our system, manipulate some filters, and we can understand that, hey, look, people that join our community, or people that take courses or people that attend events, et cetera, they are much more likely to renew. And we can see if there's any variation in that and those sorts of things over time as well. Speaking of predictive models, this is something that you can also do. You know, it's going to be better if you have data from other places, but you can absolutely do this with data that's already in your AMS. So what this is going to do is take things like characteristics. It's going to take behaviors. It's going to look at that over some period of time. In our case, it happens to be 5 years, and you can calculate. And there are different models that you can use. You can calculate the likelihood of a particular thing happening, right? So in this case, the dependent variable is renewing or not renewing, and all of the independent variables are the things that you measure, right? But you can then bucket all of the individuals into bins, you know, based on their likelihood to renew. And there are all sorts of uses for this. Imagine being able to market specifically to individuals here in these middle buckets, you know, knowing that the ones in the bottom are very unlikely to renew and the ones in the top are very likely. So you don't necessarily need to target them as heavily. Okay, sentiment, right? So Greg talked about our unstructured data before. So a lot of your data is unstructured, right? So there are different estimates, but probably 80% or more of the total data that you have is going to be unstructured. It's going to be things like text in your community or text in email or responses to surveys, things like that. And your AMS doesn't know what to do with those kinds of things, right? But your analytics system does, right? We're going to keep track of all of the posts inside your community. Each post is scored, right? It gets a score, positive, neutral, or negative. And what that does is it kind of shortcuts the process of managing all of your community data, right? Because we're using that to understand what kind of content we should provide, what kind of sessions we should provide, what kind of actions we should take. And a big part of that is knowing how people feel about our programs, about our services, about certain topics. And you can absolutely do that in an automated way. And this is kind of starting to get at some of that AI piece that we looked at before. And that is an excellent segue as we get to the last point here, is recommendations.
So this is where we really can take advantage of that AI piece, because we've done our homework, we've organized our data, we've put it together. We can finally start recommending products, content to people. And we can see all these interactions that have occurred between those different elements in our data so far. So we can use things like collaborative filtering. The idea is Bill and Greg are pretty similar, right? We both read articles about cats and dogs. Greg reads a brand new article about horses. Hey, maybe Bill is going to get that recommendation as well. Did you know other people like you are doing this? Right? Content based. I read a lot about dogs. I might also be interested in article B, which also happens to be about dogs. So our taxonomy is finally coming together. We can do affinity analysis, right? People like you frequently purchase these other things. Maybe you'd like to purchase that thing. And we can use algorithms to blend all this stuff together. Trending terms, popular items, this is hot, this is going up, right? Why do you get those recommendations on your news feed in the morning? Well, everybody else is reading about this, and they're going to be talking about it in the water cooler in the morning, and you better read it too, because you don't want to be left out on that hot trend that everybody's talking about. Why did that video go viral, right? These sort of things go into play when the AI kicks in behind the scenes and recommends things. And let's bring it home with our number one, our last thing you can do, extending the value, is licensing. How many of us have had to buy additional licenses for integrations, or additional licenses for that one team member who only accesses it once a quarter and doesn't really need full access? And earlier we talked about, you know, security in the chat there. What about giving board members access to your AMS? That seems like a terrible idea, right? Or volunteers access. Hey, if you're the chapter leader, here, have a login to our database and start updating your chapter data. What a terrible idea that is. They're going to run a report and steal all your data and run away. So we don't want to give access to everybody. And analytics gives us this really interesting view where a lot of times we get view access, but not write or delete access, which is really key, because some of the ways we want to use this are, one is reducing licensing costs, right? I don't need to buy Bill a license if he just wants to run one report once a quarter. Not worth spending the money, right? But we also might want to give access to others. So who else might we want to give access to? I've sort of name dropped a couple of these. What about board reporting? Instead of manually running the reports and compiling them into a PowerPoint and showing them the data. What if we had a folder structure that had access control built in, and we had some executive reports that were pre-built for the executives or the board based on their goals, right? Hey, you put together our strategic plan. Here's your pulse report that tells you how we're doing. I think that's a perfect use case for this.
We don't want to just let them log in and query our AMS directly.
I can't see that being successful for anybody out there.
All right. Okay, so and lastly is public facing things. So, and this can be, so this is an example, this client of ours that used Acumen to create something for the public good. This was about long COVID, right, or cases of long COVID. So they did a lot of analysis on this. And this one, Greg, tell us the story about how you found out about this in Reddit. This is a good one.
I'm a Redditor, right? So I'm on Reddit, browsing the internet, looking at what's popular, the trending topics of the day, literally. And I came across this post about long COVID, and the #1 comment was, "Did you know about the AAPM&R public dashboard that talks about this?" And I was like, "Wait a minute, that's our public dashboard." So here we are on the internet talking about a random topic in no way connected to this association, and someone talks about this public dashboard that they've created and shared, right? What a great use for our data, not only to benefit us, the staff, or our members, but to benefit society as a whole. This is a great example of how they're educating everybody on a problem that their members help solve and creating awareness about it, right? We often see, go back to our strategic plan, create awareness about these topics. How do we create awareness about topics? Do you buy that commercial on NPR? And I hear you buying those commercials on NPR. Do they really create awareness about your problem? Or would a public dashboard like this, where I can actually interact with it and have a connection to the data, would that really move the needle on awareness?
Yeah, so this, I mean, so this moves the needle with the public, right? And it also moves the needle in terms of thought leadership with prospective members for many associations. So, you know, this is all data that's in your source systems. You're aggregating it anyway. You can absolutely build, combinations, right? You can derive things from the data that's going to be useful for. So the name of the association is right here. It's AAPM&R, and you can just, it's actually just those letters .org, and maybe if someone could grab the link and drop it in the chat, that'd be helpful. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so and the other thing I would add to this is it's great to do things for the public good and for prospective members, but some associations would also do things like this that are not public but semi-public, and they're done for the benefit of members, and you can monetize that, right? You can create a new member benefit based on your aggregate data, and you absolutely can either monetize that for actual cash or just to enhance the value of your membership and make it more sticky. Okay, so that's where we're going to end up. Got some resources here that we wanted to point out. There's a blog, right? And the blog is basically your AMS wasn't designed for that, right? And so the point of this is similar to what we're talking about here today. Focus your AMS on what it's really good at. And it may seem like you're doing less with it, but this is definitely a case where less is more. You can extend the value by focusing on what it's good at, and then using your analytics platform to do the things that it's not. And then even to add on top of that, you're going to have this derived data, which you absolutely couldn't do. And then you're going to save some money in the process too, right? With those licensing and that access. So it makes sense to me, Greg. What do you think?
I think it makes sense to me. You know, I talk with a lot of people about their AMS and the feelings they have around their AMS. And I think a lot of us ask it to do things or expect, you know, magic out of it that it's not designed to do. And part of what we want to say here is you got a lot of rich data for the last 10 years in there. If it's meeting your core business requirements and it's integrating into the systems you have, maybe there's other options out there to help extend the value. Maybe analytics is the right solution for you, not banging your head against the wall with your AMS.
All right. 1 minute left. If anybody has a last minute question, we'll take it.
Shout out to Edward for being a fantastic attendee here and chatting us up in the chat. Loved having you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you at the next one in the series, which I don't even know if we know what it is yet, do we? It's whatever you say. If you want us to do a webinar about a topic, drop it in the chat, email us. The case study one, cool. Email us, let us know what you want us to cover. We've had a lot of topics that are attendee requests. The survey one we did last year was an attendee request. We did one about data governance that was definitely an attendee request. People were talking about that a lot. I think that was a really fun interactive one where we actually did data governance on the webinar. So if you have a great idea for us, or if you want us to cover a topic that you feel is exciting, let us know, and we're happy to tackle it for you. And with that, thanks for spending the last hour with us. Hopefully we delivered on our promise and didn't have another boring webinar where you felt talked at for an hour. We collaborated, we chatted, we provided some thought leadership, and hopefully everybody left here a little wiser than they started. Have a good day.